Did you know the most terrifying scientific project in human history started with a letter, a rumor, and a whole lot of panic? The Manhattan Project wasn't born out of curiosity. It was born out of fear. The fear that Nazi Germany might be building an atomic bomb first. And when Adolf Hitler and nuclear physics show up in the same sentence, people start paying attention. It began when physicists realized something incredible. Splitting an atom releases enough energy to level a city. But the people who figured that out early were German scientists. That sent shockwaves through the scientific community. So Albert Einstein, yes, the fluffy-haired genius, signed a letter to President Franklin Roosevelt, warning him that Germany might weaponize nuclear energy. Roosevelt didn't panic, but he didn't ignore it either. He quietly kicked off a secret U.S. program to research the possibility, a program that quickly exploded into a huge multinational effort. They called it the Manhattan Engineer District, or simply the Manhattan Project, named after the Army Corps office that filed the first paperwork. Not exactly glamorous, but the name stuck. Over the next few years, the project grew into a scientific empire. 3 countries, the US, the UK, and Canada, collaborated. More than 30 sites across America popped up. And over 125,000 workers joined the effort, most of whom had no idea what they were actually building. They assembled machine parts, turned wrenches, and pushed buttons without knowing they were helping create the most powerful weapon in history. While most of the workforce was kept in the dark, the scientists knew exactly what they were doing, racing Nazi Germany to build a bomb before Hitler could. And the first step? Making the nuclear fuel, uranium or plutonium, in quantities big enough to actually use. That was easier said than done. You don't find enriched uranium lying around like sacks of flour. You have to make it, atom by atom, using massive, power-hungry machinery. So the U.S. built Oak Ridge, Tennessee. While Oak Ridge and Hanford churned out nuclear fuel, the heart of the Manhattan Project beat in the high desert of Los Alamos, New Mexico. The government chose an isolated mesa, far from prying eyes, where wind-carved canyons and endless sky gave cover to the most ambitious scientific undertaking in human history. At the center of it all stood J. Robert Oppenheimer. Quiet, brilliant, contemplative, and intense, Oppenheimer had an ability almost no one else possessed: the power to unite hundreds of the world's brightest physicists under one vision. He wasn't just a scientist, he became the conductor of a symphony of genius. Scientists like Richard Feynman, Hans Bethe, Enrico Fermi, John von Neumann, and Edward Teller joined him at Los Alamos. Many were refugees from fascist regimes in Europe. Some had fled just ahead of Hitler's armies. They carried the weight of personal loss, moral fear, and scientific excitement, all at once. The challenge before them was unprecedented: turn the raw nuclear fuel being produced across the country into a functioning weapon. And not just one weapon, 2 different designs. Little Boy, the uranium bomb, was mechanically simple but fuel-hungry. Fat Man, the plutonium bomb, was far more complex. It required an implosion mechanism, a perfect inward collapse of explosive lenses, timed down to microseconds. Los Alamos became a hive of tireless work. Scientists scribbled equations late into the night. Engineers hammered out prototypes. Mathematicians calculated blast pressures. And all of them were racing the clock, and racing the fear that Germany might finish its own bomb first. But what most people don't know is that the Manhattan Project also had a shadow war inside it. Soviet spies had slipped into the program. One of Oppenheimer's trusted colleagues, Klaus Fuchs, quietly passed critical information to the USSR. Others leaked details in smaller ways. Even in a project defined by secrecy, the world's first nuclear arms race had already begun. By mid-1945, Los Alamos had designs ready. Now they needed proof. They needed fire. Before the world could see the power of the bomb, the scientists had to test it. The location chosen was Jornada del Muerto, Journey of the Dead Man, an empty desert valley in New Mexico, where silence stretched for miles. On July 16, 1945, at 5:29 a.m., the first nuclear explosion in human history tore through the desert. The Trinity Test wasn't just a scientific success. It was a moment when humanity stepped into a new era. Witnesses described the flash as brighter than the sun, The fireball expanded outward into a roiling sphere of orange and white, climbing into the sky faster than thought. The shockwave arrived seconds later, a deep rolling force that felt like the earth inhaling and then exhaling in a single violent motion. Oppenheimer later said he remembered a line from the Bhagavad Gita. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." General Groves, the military head of the project, had a simpler reaction. It worked. The bomb exceeded expectations. The scientists had split the atom and unleashed energy that reshaped the destiny of nations. But alongside the triumph came dread. Some men cheered. Others stood in stunned silence. A few quietly turned away, realizing what would happen next. The Manhattan Project was no longer an experiment. It was now a weapon, and soon a message to the world. With the Trinity Test proving the terrifying potential of nuclear weapons, the project shifted from science to strategy. Germany had surrendered months earlier. The war in Europe was over. But Japan remained defiant, and the fighting in the Pacific had become a brutal, grinding nightmare. American planners feared that a full invasion of Japan could cost over 1 million Allied lives, and perhaps even more Japanese civilians. President Harry Truman faced a decision no leader had ever faced before: use a weapon beyond anything the world had seen, or risk a long, bloody invasion. On August 6, 1945, the B-29 Enola Gay dropped the little boy uranium bomb over Hiroshima. The city vanished in a flash. An expanding sphere of heat and pressure tore buildings apart. Tens of thousands were killed instantly. Japan hesitated. Its military leaders refused to surrender. So on August 9th, the US dropped the Fat Man plutonium bomb on Nagasaki. Its destruction was just as devastating, and just as world-shattering. This time, Japan surrendered. World War II ended. But a new era, the nuclear era, had begun. The Manhattan Project had done its job. But in doing so, it had changed humanity's relationship with war, technology, and survival. When the war ended, the public celebrated victory. But inside the world of the Manhattan Project, emotions were mixed, complicated, and often painful. Some scientists believed the bomb had saved lives by preventing a catastrophic invasion of Japan. Others believed the world had crossed a moral line it could never uncross. Oppenheimer himself seemed to shoulder the weight of every life lost. He warned political leaders about the dangers of nuclear proliferation. He opposed developing the hydrogen bomb, a weapon far more powerful than those dropped on Japan. His stance angered powerful people in Washington, especially those who feared Soviet expansion. The Cold War had begun. The Soviet Union detonated its own atomic bomb in 1949, thanks in part to espionage inside the Manhattan Project. The arms race exploded into motion, and Oppenheimer, once the architect of the atomic age, was stripped of his security clearance in a highly publicized hearing. He was sidelined from the government he had once served. His story became a warning. You can build the most powerful weapon on Earth, and still lose control of the world it creates. The Manhattan Project remains one of the most consequential events in human history. It ended the deadliest war ever fought. It launched the Cold War. It sparked decades of fear, diplomacy, espionage, and brinkmanship. From nuclear power plants to intercontinental missiles, the project transformed science and politics. It shaped every conflict of the 20th century and set the boundaries of the 21st. Its legacy is complicated: a triumph of science, a tragedy of war, a warning for the future. The Manhattan Project proved humanity could split the atom, but it never proved humanity could control what came afterward. The Manhattan Project didn't end when the bombs fell or when the war stopped. Its impact rippled outward, touching every nation, every government, and every generation that came after. What began as a desperate race against Germany grew into something far larger. The moment humanity stepped into an age where its greatest threat wasn't an enemy army, but itself. In the years after 1945, scientists, soldiers, and world leaders struggled to understand what they had created. Some believed nuclear weapons were a tragic necessity, the only way to force a brutal war to a close. Others believed the world had made a bargain it could never undo, trading short-term victory for a dangerous new future. But no matter how people interpreted it, one truth was absolutely clear: there was no going back. The Manhattan Project triggered a global chain reaction: political, scientific, and moral. Nations scrambled to build their own arsenals. The Cold War hardened. And suddenly the idea of total destruction wasn't theoretical anymore. It had a blueprint, a history, and a name. Yet, in a strange way, the project also pushed the world toward cooperation. Nuclear diplomacy, arms control treaties, scientific alliances, all of them grew from the realization that no single nation could survive a nuclear war. For the first time in history, humanity had a weapon powerful enough to wipe itself out, and the shared fear of that reality forced old enemies to sit at the same table. That's the paradox of the Manhattan Project. It showed our brilliance and our brutality, our innovation and our fear, our ability to save lives, and our ability to destroy them. Oppenheimer once said the atomic bomb made the world too dangerous for war. Maybe he was right. Maybe that fear has kept the peace longer than anyone expected. Or maybe the real legacy of the project is a warning that humanity's greatest inventions will always come with consequences we can predict. But one thing remains certain. The Manhattan Project stands as one of the most important turning points in human history. A reminder that knowledge is powerful, but wisdom is priceless. And that the future depends not on what we can build, but on what we choose to do with the power we already hold. If you enjoyed this trip down the rabbit hole, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Smart History for Dumb Times. And if you feel like fueling more historical deep dives, the link to buy me a coffee is in my bio.